Let's define what is fairy tale. Fairy tale is a story often intended for the children that features fanciful and marvelous characters. Fairy tales are stories involving magical and fantastic forces, usually good versus evil, most originating in folklore, mythology, and legend. They featured fantasy beings like dwarfs, dragons, talking to animals, elves, goblins, wizards, and even, but not necessarily, fairies, because the term fairy tales seems to refer more to the fantastic and magical setting or magical influence within a story, rather than the presence of the character of a fairy within that stories. Fairy tales are often traditional. Many were passed down from storyteller to storyteller before it recorded in books. Next discussion is about the examples of the fairy tales.
Now let's move forward to the examples of fairy tale. Well, in the literal sense, fairy tales are easy to find. Look at your bookshelf. You may see titles like this: Cinderella, Snow White, Alice in Wonderland, Jack and the Beanstalk, Hansel and Gretel. Those books are the few examples of fairy tales. They belong to no one and have been adapted and retold countless times. In fact, many tales that your parents may have told you are also fairy tales. For example, the Tooth Fairy, the Boogeyman, or even Santa Claus. Those are still considered as fairy tales. Take note that if a story takes place in a magical land with fantastical creatures who perform wondrous tasks, it is very likely a fairy tale. So that's all the examples of fairy tale.
The fact about fairy tales is that there are no such rules that exactly define it. Therefore, they are categorized by their elements, types or motifs, and here are some of those types. The supernatural adversities, like the story of Hansel and Gretel, the supernatural or enchanted relatives, like the Sleeping Beauty, as well as the Beauty and the Beast, the supernatural helpers, like the story of Cinderella, magic objects, like Aladdin, supernatural power or knowledge, religious tales, realistic tales, like the story of the Falsy Aki's wife, and as well as the tales of faith, the story of the robber by Goon.
So now let's discuss about the importance of using fairy tales. Why is it important? So it is mainly important because it sparks and widens our imaginations. In a fairy tale, anything can happen and any creatures can exist. And when anything can happen, we can find solutions to a thing in our real lives. It is like we reflect our imaginations to our real world. So through imagination, we learn about our real world. We go beyond to our imaginations because we explore outcomes and possibilities.
The last one is the example of fairy tale in literatures. A fairy tale is a short story often involving magic and legendary deeds. The fantastical characters found in a fairy tale include elves, fairies, witches, and a dragon. Fairy tales are traditional stories told and retold through the generation, usually spawned from folklore, many were finally written down and have had lasting fame. So example of this fairy tale include Cinderella, Princess and the Frog, The Ginger Man, Hansel and Gretel, Jack and the Beanstalk, Little Red Riding Hood, Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, Thumbelina, and etc. Now you have seen a few of examples of classic stories considered fairy tale. As you can see, fairy tale can include magic, talking animals, or a touch of realism. Unlike fables, fairy tales don't always contain a moral or lesson. They can be pure entertainment, but often teach about consequences and values like kindness and patience. That's all. Thank you.